I can't wait for you to listen to this podcast today with Ann Mortifee. And it is simply insufficient to capture the life that she has had. But what I hope it does is give you the feeling of her character, her spirit, her incredible journey, and may you stay open-minded and absorb what is meant for you from this incredible conversation, because I guarantee you will feel differently at the end of it. This is part one of our two-part conversation with Ann Mortifee, so let's dive in. Welcome to the Miles to Zen podcast, and welcome back to all our listeners. I'm so glad you found this podcast today. And today we are having a wonderful chat with Ann Mortifee. Ann is a Canadian singer, composer, librettist, author, storyteller, keynote speaker. She's a member of the Order of Canada, which, if you are Canadian, you know that this is a very big deal. And she's received countless distinctions and awards for albums, concerts, musicals, scores, film, opera, TV, and also for her book, In Love with the Mystery, which I have right here. We can see it. We'll talk about that later. And she also facilitates arts and consciousness workshops, has co-founded two foundations, one for social innovation and one for forestry conservation. So welcome, Ann. I'm so thrilled to have you with us today.
I'm thrilled to be with you, Shannon. And I've got to tell your audience that you are the most patient woman in the world. We have made at least 4 or 5 moments we were going to get together, and either I had to change it and this morning we changed another one, and that was because I was taking care of my chickens.
If anyone knows me, they know by now that that is a very good excuse for, delaying, postponing. I've got a soft spot for chickens.
Yeah, I do too. Very big.
Well, animals in general. But I knew that whenever we talked, it would be the perfect time.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. It
So
always
I
is.
knew that, yes, exactly. And then things would just unfold as they should. And so, I mean, as anyone who's just heard that introduction knows, there's a lot of different places that we could take this conversation. And as always, just grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just pretend like you're sitting there with us at this coffee shop, because
Cheers.
Cheers. I have my little
Yep.
The joy is in the journey cup. And I just knew that whichever road we went down, it would be a really beautiful discussion. And I wanted to actually read out what a friend had sent to me, because I told her that I was talking to you. And she, Joanne Blondheim is her name. It used to be Lafido. She said she got to go to your house and that you were really into the Book of Miracles, and you had an amazing meditation room, and she loved your house. And she also said, Reflections on Crooked Walking. I loved that show and the music. And I can't wait to listen to this discussion. So
That's sweet. Thank you.
So that's from Joanne.
Thank you, Joanne.
I know she'll be definitely joining us for this coffee chat for sure.
Good.
Another moment in time and space, but she'll be there.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if I missed anything. Well, I'm sure I have missed things in your introduction, but is there anything you would add?
No.
You were born in South Africa.
Yeah, I was born in South Africa. And I think that really probably the central thing for me was that in Africa, number one, I was caught between the Zulu people, basically, who ran the farm, and my British parents that were South African,
right?
From British stock a couple of generations back. And so I was kind of brought up by two cultures. And I've realized what an impact. Oh, it's the beauty about getting older is that you you start to see the ongoing impact that has happened right from the very beginning. Things that were wounding for you, things that were fabulous for you, and you see how they reverberate and echo like a skipping rock across your life. So for me, the chickens are a skipping rock.
Right.
You know, and being with Zulu people, it kind of transferred to the Native American people when I came to Canada. And right from the beginning, I was aware of other layers that, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, but we don't see everything that's
Yeah.
going on around us.
Right.
And so I would have to say that that was sort of the beginning of my spiritual sense of things, was just the immensity of the world and the different ways you can look at things and the different ways you can experience life.
Well, that's interesting because I'm looking it up now actually, because I remember you writing something and it was about Rita. It was, yeah, the Ecstasy of Rita Jo. And you had said that Rita's story taught me that art is meant to lead culture to higher levels of awareness. So it's like you've been,
Mhm.
I think almost that you were always aware of it, and maybe the art then gave you that tool or that canvas of which to
Yeah,
express
I
it.
think I already knew it, Shannon, but I wasn't aware of it. I was
Oh,
living
okay,
it. Do you
okay,
know what I mean? You
okay,
can be living in a situation where you're not consciously aware of what's happening to you. You're just there.
right.
And it was the first really major thing I ever did as an artist. I mean, I'd never written really I'd never written a song. I had learned how to play the guitar. I was 17, and
Mhm.
when I was playing the guitar, I fell so in love with it that I was spending all my spare time in school doing it. And they had a hootenanny in a little club, and those were in the 60s, when there were hootenannies, and the club was just a coffee house, and the girls at my school dared me to go, and I went. And I was seen while I was there by a Black singer from down south in America by the name of Josh White Sr., who was quite well known at the time and had lived all through the Jim Crow years and so forth. And so there I was, a young South African girl who was singing away, and he was coming in the next week to do his concerts
Okay.
and he invited me to open the show for him. And I
Wow.
do not know why my
Wow.
parents let me, but I ended up doing that.
So this was in Vancouver,
It
where
was
you
in
were at a
Vancouver.
coffee house in Vancouver playing,
Yeah,
and he happened to be there.
singing there. Yeah. And on the
Wow.
Sunday, they had the hoot nanny. And so he asked if I would stay that next week and sing. And that was what brought me into it. So I did quite a lot of singing at that little place. And Les Stork, who owned the bunkhouse, which was at Davy and Seymour, I came to pick up my guitar one afternoon and he said, "Oh, are you going to the audition?" I said, "What's an audition?" And he said, "Oh, you get up and you apply for something." And I said, "No, no, 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 no. No, I don't know anything about acting." Anyway, he insisted, took me down to the Playhouse Theater, and I said, "Well, what do I do?" And he said, "Just walk on the stage and sing," which I did, and I got the
Wow.
job to
Wow.
be basically the soul of Rita Jo in the Ecstasy of Rita Jo. And the play had been written by George Riga, who became a very dear friend of mine. And it was about a native girl who was sort of split in two. And so all the scenes went, either she was on the streets of Vancouver or a city, or she was remembering and being in the presence of her early life with her grandfather and family on the reservation. And Chief Dan George was playing the father, and he played with Dustin Hoffman in Little Big Man.
Okay.
And so half the cast was white and half the cast was native. And I had this incredible gift of the two sides of myself being there.
Yeah.
And so my career started as a singer and a writer, because the chap who had been hired to do the music, to write the music, I was just the girl singer. And I was 17, I think, at the time. And he often wasn't there for rehearsals. And so they'd say to me, Anne, just sing anything, like just make up anything, because we've got to see if the music is going to work in
Right.
these, because it was the first time the play was being done. I said, you mean just sing something? And he said, yeah, there's the script. Just take the script and sing. I said, okay. I was more afraid not to do it than to do it almost, you
Right.
know? And they brought in a little recorder and they record me and they say, take this home and learn it. We want to use it in the show. And that's how I became a composer. I did not have the confidence to think, oh, I could write music. You know, I was just learning the guitar at the time. So it was through Chief Dan George that I realized that apartheid in South Africa, which had started around the time I was born, which was a terrible thing in the country. It separated everyone, separated families, you know. They lost their land, they lost everything. Yeah. And that it had been based on the Indian Act of Canada. And I went, wow. And something in me knew that's why I was brought to this country and not to somewhere else. And I didn't know what that meant at that time.
Wow.
So, you know, that part of my life has, and I've realized I've got as much indigenous not understanding, but there's a way that an indigenous culture is connected. And Gosololo, who had been my nanny, she gave me this vision of a world that was interrelated on every level. And so, you know, she would say, you don't know what the world would be like without the footprints of Inglovu, the elephant, to tell us about the heartbeat of the mother, you know?
Wow.
So I just had this wonderful opportunity to straddle both cultures and find my way. Yeah.
Oh, isn't that amazing? That is quite the beginning to this incredible journey that you've had.
It was a perfect beginning for me. Perfect.
But so rooted in nature and so rooted in that connection to all things. And you know, your songs and the work that you've done, it feels like it's just been ahead of its time on the spiritual connection front. Like, I think that we can get an incredible connection to the oneness, to God, source, universe, whatever your term is, when we're in nature. And certainly Jane Goodall felt that when she was in the forest. And
yeah.
And bless her and her work so much.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful woman. Oh, I love her dearly.
Oh, me too. And this is just, these themes are just woven throughout your work.
Yeah, they really are. And I think that, you know, I've gone through different religions. I've got a natural propensity towards spirit. And I think it was because my first memory as a girl is a very vivid, recurring dream I used to have. And it really, I think, was the template for my life without my realizing it. And what it was that I would be, the dream was, I was somebody standing looking into a room, and there was a young girl lying on a bed, and I get this feeling, uh-oh, be careful, that the pull's going to be very strong. Be very careful. You're going to get stuck in that dream. And the dream seems to get stronger and stronger. And suddenly I find myself sitting up and looking at my hands in the dream and saying, these aren't my hands. These are someone else's hands. This is the girl's hands. Oh, I'm stuck in the dream again. I'm stuck in the dream again. No, wake up, get out of the dream. And I couldn't. And I'd say, looking at my hands, oh, who am I? When I'm not dreaming, I'm Ann. And it was so vivid, and I had it so often. I mean, I can remember going into Mom and saying, Mommy, are you my mother? And she said, of course, darling, of course I'm your mother. What a silly thing to say. I, I, I don't know who my mother is, but I don't think you're my mother. And she said, darling, of course I'm your mother. And then as it went on and on, I was constantly saying, do you think I belong here? Do you think I'm meant to be here? Is this, I had this very strong memory of not being what I was doing, but being somebody who I can't quite remember her.
Isn't that interesting?
So I think that really started me on the spiritual journey of, well, who am I when I'm not dreaming? I mean, and then you say, who am I? And then you go, that's what all the spiritual teachers say. You've got to figure out, who am I? What is the I in me? So that, I think, is what took me into religions. And I can remember when I read, that Moses says to the burning bush, who are you? And he says, say that I am that I am. I said, I know that I am. I'm that I am. And then going, no, that's not possible, because I couldn't create a burning bush. So I've had these not conflicting, but who am I? That question, and there's something I've forgotten. So I've wanted to remember.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because I just put a few things together myself when I was reading about Dr. Eben Alexander's near-death experience. And I was reading one of his books, and it was talking about his partner, and a Dutch fellow had met them for the first time and said to his partner, I'm sure you've had an NDE. You've got the feeling of somebody who's had a near-death experience, talking to his partner. And at that moment in time of reading that book, I thought, oh my goodness, the same I feel. There's a very strong possibility that I had a near-death experience as a child. And the way you are talking, it makes me feel like that you may have had one too. And mine was at about 1.5 years. And my mom has told me that story. And so, because I would think the same thing, I would be out in the barnyard and I would be having this can't be my life. Right. There's something else, not that I was unhappy with my life, but I felt like I was not from here or where I was.
Yeah.
And I didn't, and now, I mean, I've dug into that more so now, but isn't that fascinating?
Oh, it's totally fascinating, which is why so many kids think they're adopted.
Yeah.
I come from somewhere else, I think, and maybe they have been in this lifetime, but often it's just a faint memory of.
Right.
Before you cross what do they call it? The river of forgetfulness and into being born.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And another thing that Jane Goodall was talking about was how she's looking forward to going on this great adventure. This is her next great adventure. And I'm sure that that's when these questions get answered for all of us.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny. I don't seem to have any fear of death, And I think that part of the reason I've lived the life I've lived is that I would never have thought I was courageous. I just had a faith in something. I had a faith that it was going to work out. And if I died, it was the perfect time. Funny.
That is, so were your parents at all religious?
Not at all. They were, we didn't go, the only religion I got was Christmas.
Okay.
And that was more Father Christmas than the baby Jesus, because it
Right.
was Father Christmas who brought the presents.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then as I got older, I fell in love with, I had a conversion experience with Jesus when I was about 13, 12 or
Okay.
13. And oh, I got a vision of sort of unconditional love. You know, and you never know who Jesus really is because you're, of course, projecting yourself onto him or what you need.
Yeah.
But I definitely had the experience of feeling totally safe, completely loved. Um, and we'd moved from Africa, and I was I went through a rough time. You know, it was so cold here, and
Well, it's so different
so different. Yeah, from
and
living on a
cold in
farm and
in other ways too, right?
yeah,
You didn't have
yeah,
your friends,
yeah,
and
everything. Well, yeah, didn't live the life I was leading, and yeah, so and that was a wonderful, wonderful experience to have that sense of being absolutely saved, loved, perfect. I mean, you're supposed to think you're a sinner too, but I grew to realize that sin meant, in the archery thing, to sin is to just miss the mark,
right.
and that it wasn't you've done something terribly wrong. It just means put in the correction and try again for the bullseye.
That was not the churches that I went to.
No, exactly.
The churches that I went to where you've done something terribly.
Very wrong by being born. Yeah. No. So, and it's been wonderful because I mean that's a long story, but and then moving on to really becoming fascinated in Eastern consciousness, and then now quantum consciousness, it just becomes interesting. Life is very interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we will keep on ending up coming back to this because I think it's, one of your favorite subjects and certainly is one of mine. And, but I wanted to talk a bit more about your musical journey. What happened then after that production?
Well, it was extraordinary how that production, number one, gave me a sense because we went across Canada and everywhere we went, people were waking up. It was just it was in this 67 about. And so the awareness of what had happened to the First Peoples was horrific. And so I got my sense, I knew what was going on in South Africa, but I was so young, it wasn't registering.
Mhm.
But through Chief Dan, Chief Dan George, I really began to feel, oh my gosh, no wonder I had this feeling about apartheid. And so I got my social conscience, I guess, of
Right.
understanding we have to change. But what Rita Jo did to me was that I saw it changing people.
Right.
And it was one of the first things that the culture, I mean, it became an international hit, went all over the world. So in Australia, it was about the Aboriginal people there,
Yeah.
and New Zealand and South America. And so that made me aware that I was that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to sing. Well, because of my Christian experience, I wanted to sing to God, whatever
Yeah.
God is at that time. It was a
Yeah.
little narrower, but now it's a little bigger, And and I wanted to sing, and I wanted to do things that shifted consciousness. I
Right.
didn't think of it as shifting consciousness, but that helped, that made the world a more loving place.
Oh,
That led,
I
so
love
Rita
that.
Jo ended up going to open the arts club, the arts center, the National Arts Center in Ottawa. So I went with it, and I was seen there by a producer, and he asked if I could spend the rest of the summer there. And so I went into a show called Love and Maple Syrup, which was about Canadian writers, actually. And that show went to New York. I went with it to New York. Meanwhile, writing, and I ended up in I did a musical, and I just love musicals. And I love that people could burst into song and take the feeling of what you were saying to each other in the some enchanted evening, or whatever it was. And I love being able to speak through song. So when I went to New York, I ended up, um, people saw me there, and I ended up getting an agent who arranged for me to go to auditions. And I got the opportunity to play the lead in a Broadway musical. And so I was very excited about that. But when I had to work on the music with the musical director before I'd signed the contract, and it's nothing to say about the song is absolutely delightful. It was, but it went, what do you get when you fall in love? You get enough germs to catch pneumonia. And after you do, he'll never phone you. I'll never fall in love again. And I went, after what I'd been singing about Rita Jo.
Yeah.
I said, oh my God. And the contract I had to sign was 3 years, 8 shows a night. A week, 8 shows a week. And I thought, oh my God, what if I died singing this song? What if this is what the only thing I was talking about is this kind of, like there were lots of other songs I had to sing, but I had had an experience with Rita Jo that was so life-changing and so relevant to the world that my feeling, what you get, I might catch pneumonia and then he'll never phone you. I just couldn't do it. So I went to my agent when I was there to sign the contract, and I said, couldn't I do this for 6 months? And he said, no, it's a 3-year contract. It's got to be that, because they're not going to put that money into you and blah, blah. And it just so happened that he got a phone call that he had to take, and he was on the phone, and he said, he was arguing with a producer about why his client, which I was about to be, should get a 16th of an inch larger print on a poster. And then he was getting. And he was getting quite aggressive about it. And then he said to me, just a minute, I'll check with my secretary. He put his hand over the thing. And he said to me, what are 3 television shows at the moment? And I went, Mod Squad, blah, 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 whatever they were, I can't remember. And he said, yeah, he had a lead in Mod Squad and blah, 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 blah. And I said, my agent is lying. He is lying right in front of me. I was so indignant. And I just, right then, I knew I wasn't going to sign it. I wasn't going to do it. And nobody could understand. They said, my God, you would have been thrown into the world in a huge way. I just didn't want to do that. So I said, I can't sign this contract. And he said, then you might as well leave. So I left New York. And I thought, oh, have I been so stupid? Blah, blah, blah. Got home, was home 2 days. And I got a call, and Mom said, oh, it's for you. And I was looking for an apartment to rent and everything. And it was Arnold Spohr from the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, who wanted me to come and write the music for a ballet. And I said, I can't possibly. I said, I've written like 4 or 5 songs. That's it for Rita Jo. And he said, well, we like them and we want you to come and write a ballet. I said, I don't even read music. I know nothing about music. I've never seen a ballet. And he said, well, tell me, Ann. And Norbert Wiesack was the choreographer who I adored. He was so wonderful. And He wants you. He wants you. And I said, well, I don't think I can do it. No, I don't think I can possibly do that. And he said, listen, Anne, do you understand Rita Jo? And I said, oh, I wouldn't say I understand. No. And he said, well, do you love her? I said, yeah, I love her. I feel, I feel, I feel her. And he said, why don't you bring your heart to Winnipeg and we'll see what happens? That would never happen now. But that was how I ended up writing the ballet, which blew the lid off my career.
That is Goosebumps Central.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, I didn't know I was on the edge of nerves all the time, feeling I'm not adequate. I don't know how to do this. And I would say to Norbert, need some help, Norbert. And he'd say, let's go up. And we'd go up into the rehearsal hall where the dancers worked on our own at night and put on candles. And he'd say, what do you need me to dance? And I'd say, I want you to tell me what sorrow looks like. And he'd start to dance, and then my hands would start to move on the guitar, and out it would come.
Wow. So
that was how
you were essentially channeling this amazing stuff. Like it was just flowing through you.
Flowing through,
You
the
were in
muse.
you were in the zone.
Yeah. Well, that's why they say there's, the muse either comes or it doesn't.
Right.
And I, and if you allow the feelings to overwhelm you, they will lead the music.
Yeah.
And then if you can articulate what the music is making you feel, and that's what I learned how to do.
That is just incredible, right? Like now there's so many terms for that. Or there feels like there's more people just talk about that. But there's so few people I find who can do it.
Well, it's also that we're living in a time, when I was growing up, you couldn't go into any store on a Sunday.
Yeah.
There were no stores. So that whether you were religious or not, Sunday was a day where you went, in many ways, inward. You'd have dinner with your parents or something. There was a way where the world stopped.
Right.
And as one by one, there was no more, quote, remembering the Sabbath, but there was no more, there was never time where you could be sure you could get together with your mother, for instance.
Right.
Because you might be going to work in the store or do whatever you had to do. And I think that now there's so much going on externally, you're having your experience several feet away from anything. So it requires your looking at it and experiencing it and saying, oh, that's cool. That's, but it's out there. It's rather than in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's led us astray in so many ways. Not only that, Arnold Spohr was extraordinary, and that he would bring what was I, 19, 18, 18-year-old to write a ballet for one of the best ballet companies in Canada.
Well, he obviously had a feeling. He was
had a feeling.
Very in touch with his intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd obviously had success following that inner voice before.
Yeah. But most people who run companies now don't necessarily have that.
Well, I think we've gone through such a period of materialism and rational thought.
Yeah.
Or quote unquote rational thought leading the way. And at the same time, I felt that, I left corporate a year ago, and I felt that the conversations were starting to shift, and people were talking about gut feelings, and
Yes.
people were talking about the sensors that were in our bodies.
Mhm.
Um, and that really surprised me, being in a tech company,
Yeah.
hear these conversations. So that gave me a lot of hope. And it also gave me vocabulary to reflect back to them when I wanted to share something around like an
Near death
intuition
experience.
kind of thought.
Yeah.
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 And I was like, well, I just need to share it with that vocabulary that is starting to surface and
Yes.
see how
Yes.
we do. So I feel that there is some momentum in that area. And
No
that,
question. There's been a huge shift in consciousness.
yeah,
I mean, where I really saw the shift in consciousness was, strange enough, in airports, because I was doing so much traveling, singing,
right.
and there was a time the only spiritual book you could get there was really the Bible, and maybe now and then something maybe by the Dalai Lama, which was, whoa, really? And then suddenly, and in those days, if you said, "Oh, I meditate," oh, are you in a cult?
Oh, yes, I remember our neighbor when I was growing up did yoga.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well,
Ooh,
yeah,
ooh.
it was talked about. Oh, she does yoga.
Hmm.
It was one of those things.
I know. And now, if you do yoga, that really where you see it the most is on billboards where someone's selling some sexy outfit to do your yoga in, you know. But at the time, I remember Paul, my husband, Paul Horn, he told me about a record producer coming to him and who was one of the tops of one of the major um, record companies, a totally corporate guy, saying, "Paul, could you hold something very secret if I asked you something?" And Paul said, "Sure." He said, "I'm interested in this meditation thing, but nobody could know because I'd probably lose my job."
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's been a big shift. And now you go through an airport and there's huge sections of personal growth
yeah,
and different spiritual paths. It's quite thrilling, really. So, but it's almost like that's caused a separation. Like we're becoming more materialistic and less materialistic.
yeah.
And now, and with quantum physics becoming part of the conversation, you realize, yeah, I always knew. I would look at my hands like I did in that dream and say, these aren't real. And then you realize, no, they're not. They're made up of moving waves that are, you know, if you look deep enough, it's just empty space in there. I mean, and you go, really? You know,
Yeah,
so fabulous.
it is. And so then um, when did you move into, well, I guess you always had some consciousness stuff in your work, but then what happened after the Winnipeg Ballet?
After the Winnipeg Ballet, just a minute, I think, oh, I was offered to do my first one-woman show by Bill Millard, who ran the Arts Club Theatre in Vancouver. And that was a real awakening for me because I was able to take monologues and poetry and things things that I'd written myself. I became really good friends with a woman by the name of Valerie Hennell. She became my best friend. And, we met when I was 18, she was 17. She was a Capricorn. So she was a lot smarter than I was, the
She
Sagittarius
was getting
going for the
stuff done.
fire. Huh?
She was getting stuff done.
Well, she got a lot done. But we loved each other and we still do. And she and I just formed a link, and she couldn't believe I still got $25 to go and sing for a whole evening. And she said, "That's ridiculous." And so she said, I said, "Well, I can't ask for more. I do this for the joy of it." And she said, "I can ask for more for you." So, so she
Everybody
did.
needs friends like that.
Yeah, really. So she did that. And we wrote a lot of songs together, so it really opened up my sphere of writing because she wrote poetry. But I'd never thought of writing words. I mean, no, 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 no. That was even more scary than music, because music kind of came out on the feeling level, but this had to use your brain. And I'd
Oh,
never done well in school or anything, you know. I wasn't interested until I grew older, and then everything became interesting, you know.
yeah, I know exactly. I was never very good at music, but I did used to love to make up songs.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
will be new news to anyone because I certainly nobody wants me singing them. But growing up with a lot of animals, I had a rather large audience.
Yeah,
They
right.
they were mostly Black Angus, but
Great.
but they loved my work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, it is funny that that conversation between the lyrics and the music.
Yeah.
And for me, if I listen to a song and I don't like the lyrics, I have a really hard time liking the song. And
Yeah.
my husband, who's all about the music, it's like, well, but listen to that music. It doesn't matter what the words say, just listen to how amazing that music is.
Yeah, I know. I kind of have to have both, you know, or else it's jangling. Because if the music is glorious and the words are about something, you know, I go, oh, the split in me is too big.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely how
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I need balance.
yeah,
I know
right.
that's a shocker. And so you did that work with your friend and
Yeah, and so I start, and then oh, I know what had happened. I had met someone when Rita Jo had gone to Ottawa, and next door to us in the theater, because they had three theaters next door to where we were, uh, they were doing Jacques Brel's Alive and Well and Living in Paris.
okay.
I fell in love with Jacques Brel's music, like seriously. You mean you can be that out there? You can sing about anything? Oh my God. That he was such a gift to me. And I was asked out of the blue if I would come to Milwaukee to play in Rita Jo.
Oh wow.
And that was just incredible because I, I just, I just grew incredibly at that time because it was so intense. And some of it was so what would be the raw, you know, and he was writing all about things that he cared about,
Okay.
and that kind of freed me. And then what happened after that? Um, it gets to be a bit of a blur. How did I
Well,
go off on that
yeah. So
pilgrimage?
and
I know when I went to London. Oh, I know. I was invited to come to New York. We played it in Vancouver, Rita Jo, and I had 9 months to really kind of learn to be very comfortable on the stage, very comfortable on so many levels. And during that time, I started to write reflections on crooked walking.
okay.
And it was actually based on a dream I had when I was um, expanding from my very narrow view of Christianity and starting to see, wait a minute, if my love's a tiny thing and I would never want anyone to be in hell and damnation for all time, uh, 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 I cannot believe that the person that I'm loving is even thinking about things like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, it was all about these kids, these four people that wake up one day and they realize they're the only ones left awake in a town full of sleeping people. And so they set off in search of a cure to the sleeping sickness. And that led me to the professor at the end of the play is working with E equals MC squared. And they needed the letter E to finish the word cure. And so they're begging him for an E. And he's saying, oh, you take this E, this emptiness, this energy, and it changes itself. Oh, yes, it changes itself into E, everything. And until that happened, I hadn't realized what the ending of the play would be. I had no idea how to resolve it. I didn't know what the cure was. And so anyway, writing musicals was just like peanut butter on toast. It's so delicious. It's so delicious,
I knew we were kindred spirits. I love peanut butter on toast. And so isn't that amazing that, when you launch yourself down a creative path and even a creative life, you don't know what that end point is, what that end project is going to look like, what it's going to look like down the years.
Yeah.
But you were following something greater than you, I would say.
Yeah. And sometimes that something greater than me took me totally away from music.
Right.
I mean, I went to, I through a series of long things, pretty serendipitous things, actually. But I was in New York doing Jacques Brel for 6 weeks. And I ended up being taken to London in England to do my second CD. My first was Rita Jo, and my second was Baptism. And he was a very well-known producer in London and working with the top agents for EMI Records. And so I went and did my second album there, which was wonderful. I was with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. And I was 23? Like, really?
Anyway, yeah, you probably were.
And I kept saying, how did I get here? And how do I know what this all is? But while I was there, I was aware of the power of the industry.
Right.
And I remember so thrilled. Valerie was with me, and then she went off to Ibiza, and I was sitting at a long table where they were having a dinner for all the major EMI artists, all the big people of the year that time. It was when the Beatles and everybody were working. I was working in Abbey Road Studios.
Yeah,
and all of that,
It's incredible.
And I remember they played Baptism at the dinner table for them all. Said, "This is our new artist, and we'd like you to, just meet her," and da-da-da-da. It was at the beginning of the meal. And we ate the meal, and suddenly, during this meal, I hear an inner voice that is so strong and so loud.
Tune in next week for the second half of this awesome, inspiring conversation that brings us through the life of a Canadian icon. And I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please like, subscribe, and mark your calendars for the 20th of October, where part 2 is coming out. Have a great week. See you next week.